Hi, I'm Greg Sandow, and I'm sitting here with Gloria dePasquale, who is a cellist in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and who, by the way, I really have to say this, was just playing live in this room. I guess you actually saw her on this couch, but I was here. This is not a fancy production setup, and I heard it. And Gloria, I've known you for a few years now, and it was just a pleasure to hear you play.
Why, thank you.
Because we are going to get all hot and heavy about some of the inner details of being an orchestra musician and some of the problems that the field faces. And we shouldn't forget, should we, that the music is what it's
That's what it's about.
But we were joking before about how you are a member of the multitudinous dePasquale string player
Yes.
clan, which has,
You have to define which dePasquale you're talking about here.
well, why don't you do this for us so everybody can place it? And you have colonized, you said, 4 of the 5 big 5 orchestras.
Yes, we've hit 4 of the big 5. My brother-in-law Joseph was principal viola in the Boston Symphony before coming to Philadelphia Orchestra as principal viola. My brother-in-law Robert was in the New York Philharmonic under Leonard Bernstein before he came at Eugene Normandy's invitation to the Philadelphia Orchestra. He was the assistant principal's second violin in the Philadelphia Orchestra for decades. And then, of course, my husband, William, is in the Philadelphia Orchestra. He came from one of the minor league orchestras, the Louisiana Philharmonic. He was concertmaster of that first. And
minor league, but estimable.
Right. And then, of course, we have the current generation. We have my niece Ellen, who is Robert's daughter, who is the associate concertmaster of the Cleveland Orchestra. So that gives us 4 out of 5. So we say to daughter Francesca, who's 15 and a budding violinist, that Chicago's wide open territory.
And she better go there.
Yeah.
Family honor demands it. And something else we were talking about is that we've both come here after fairly busy days.
Oh, yeah.
And you've been in meetings all day.
I got up at 5:30 this morning in Philadelphia, played my scales, got on the train and came to New York City to have meetings from 10 until 3 with the American Symphony Orchestra League. And then we walked over in the rain, and I said, oh, give me a few minutes to play scales again before I burst into the Brahms double cadenza. So one has to become quite versatile. I always tell my students they have to know something well enough to be able to be pulled out of bed in the middle of the night and be able to perform it. And when they can do that, they really know it. So I guess this is sort of like that.
Yeah, I think that's the mark. No, that's the mark of professional in every field. And you also had to be up for those meetings.
Yes, very challenging.
And you're on the board of the American Symphony Orchestra.
I'm on the board of the American Symphony Orchestra League, and I'm also on the board of the Philadelphia Orchestra and on its executive board as well.
Let's say, something that we need to talk about, because some people might say you're a musician who's collaborating with the enemy.
Ooh, yes, sleeping with the enemy. Well, you know, a few years back, I probably would have said the same thing. I mean, I've been at this since 1977 in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and 3 years before that in the Buffalo Philharmonic. So I've had a really decades-long career. And when I first came into this field, you were expected to play your instrument at a very high level, still are, but that's all you were expected to do. It's like, sit down, shut up, and play the cello, and your 5-person orchestra member committee will take care of everything else that needs to be taken care of. And over the decades, that has really changed a lot, and personally, I think for the better. And in the case of the Philadelphia Orchestra, we had a meeting just yesterday. I'm currently on our members committee, the one that takes care of everything, so to speak. And we called a meeting of all the members of the Philadelphia Orchestra, 100+ members here we're talking about, who are either currently elected to a committee or serving on some ad hoc appointed committee in the orchestra, so that we could improve our communication for the year. And when we all got into the room, we realized that we're 40 some odd players who are participating on these committees, some in a multitude of roles. And I would say we have another 15 who are maybe taking this year off for one reason or another, a sabbatical, or maybe, they just need a breather from committee life or whatever. So in other words, we've got more than half of the orchestra really participating in the daily activities of how this orchestra is run, and I think it's starting to make a huge difference in how we feel about our jobs and the ownership we feel and the pride we feel and the joy and the satisfaction that we get out of it.
And I would think also the understanding of the management challenges that the orchestra faces. All kinds of challenges, yes. Artistic challenges, community challenges, because it's a different environment now from
Very
what it
different.
was a generation ago.
And it's so important to understand for the young musicians, for the older musicians, for all of us to really understand how our art is funded. If we don't understand how that happens, we're just blowing in the wind and just hoping that we're going to have somebody come to hear us because we're great. And I'm here to tell you that's really not going to be the case.
So give me an example of specific ways that these things come up and specific things that the musicians, that you are asked to help make decisions about.
Well, right now in the Philadelphia Orchestra, our highest executive in the management, the position is open. And this had been held previously by a man for 16 years, Joe Kluger. He did a really fine job for the Philadelphia Orchestra, but his tenure was up. He went on to other things, and it was time for the orchestra to find new leadership. So a new committee was formed of board members, equal parts, board members, staff and administration, and musicians. And together, we are searching for this new head. And as we do this search, we're discovering more things about ourselves as an institution. And we're revisiting all our mission statements and things that we believe in and programs that we want to do and what we feel is most valuable to us, things that we would want to have someone not touch when they come in, but to enhance, things that really are, so to speak, sacred to the institution at this point because we've all become owners of those programs and are working collaboratively towards the ends of those programs.
So roll the clock back. If this was 20 years ago, 10 years ago,
I can tell you what
the board
happened.
would have been holding these meetings by itself.
Well, 16 years previously, we had been on tour, and I was chair of the orchestra committee at the time. And our executive director at the time, Steve Sell, was very ill with lung cancer, and we were in Japan. And we got a notice that Steve had passed away. And the next morning, the orchestra committee was called in by one of the managers and said that the board had decided overnight that Joe Kluger, who was in an assistant position under Steve Sell, would just be elevated to manager. And that was that. Done. Overnight. No consultation with anyone.
And of course you knew Joe.
Oh, of course,
obviously,
yes.
And you had some idea of what to expect. But of course, one never knows completely. So you, as a musician, are put in the position of saying, well, I wonder what this is going to be.
Right, and he was quite young at the time and had not been with us for very long.
Right.
So we really didn't know what to expect.
And you wondered what are his priorities and what kinds of decisions will he make and what directions will he take us in. Whereas now, to say the obvious, you're getting to enunciate all of this before the person is hired, and you're getting to help interview the person?
Yes, right.
You personally are involved in this?
Yes. In fact, our first step, after we decided what our job description would be, we hired a search firm, and we were part of choosing the search firm. And there was an even smaller committee that I was on, again, equal parts management board and musicians who interviewed the search firms. And now we're working with the search firm to redefine that or define further the job description.
And so finally, when somebody is chosen, you'll be able to say to yourself, to your colleagues in the orchestra, this is the person that we helped to choose.
That's right.
Would not have been chosen if we had strongly opposed it.
Right.
And we chose this person because he or she, we know, wants to go in this direction, and will protect these things that we care about.
That we value.
So now, what problems in the field does that address? You say you're going to feel more ownership. Does this lead us into a discussion of ways in which musicians have not felt ownership in the past?
I think so, and I think when you don't have participation in some of these major decisions that are going to guide your orchestra the executive director or the president of your organization has a huge role, both in serving you and in representing you in the community, and indeed, in our case, globally. It's a very important, visible position. And if you have someone there who's not representing you the way you want to be represented, then you're not in your happiest moments. This way, hopefully we will find somebody that we are all happy with, who will live up to our expectations. But say something doesn't quite work out, we also take the ownership for that. Mm-hmm. If it was a failed choice or a failed experiment in some way, some other project that we're working collaboratively on. Whereas in the past, sometimes when we first started this musician participation in Philadelphia, I would feel they would invite us in and they would listen to what we wanted to say. And in fact, I could point to a couple of other positions on the staff that were filled this way, where certain committees were formed and people's opinions were asked. And in the end, the management would say, well, that's fine, but that's not our choice. So it kind of gave us the impression, well, they want us there, and they want us to agree with what their choice is. It's kind of window dressing.
It doesn't matter what you think,
right? It didn't
because
really matter.
They're
right.
free to disregard
right.
it. In this case, is there a formal procedure that is a certain number of votes are necessary before somebody can be chosen?
Right, and we have all equal number of...
You have equal number.
And it's interesting, too, because our music director will be also allowed to listen to the interviews. Right. He has no more voice than I have, or no more voice than any of the other musicians or any of the other staff.
And in theory, the staff and board could outvote the musicians, but that would really be unwise if they want this procedure to work.
And they know. They can also point to some failed collaborative processes in our past, and they want this one to succeed. So I don't think they would risk that.
Because the Philadelphia Orchestra has had a fairly tumultuous history between labor and management, so to speak, between musician and management, and everybody knows that you have to get over that. You better, for people who might not know about it, outline what that has been. Well,
there was one famous strike in 1963, I think it was. Okay. 1963. And it was funny, it was my husband's first year in the orchestra, and he had just come back from Carnegie Hall, where he played with Heifetz on one of the Heifetz Piatigorsky Chamber Music concerts in the afternoon, which was the pinnacle of his career.
Right.
And he came back to the Philadelphia Orchestra and walked the picket line with the orchestra that night.
That's actually even stranger than going from meetings to playing the cello to this conversation.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it runs in the family then for us to do these strange things. And then we had one, it was 1996, I think was when we had our tumultuous strike, and we were out like 11 weeks. It was really terrible. And unfortunately, it was very acrimonious the whole time. And, public was taking sides with either side, and it was just took us a long time to recover from that.
But then it almost happened again at your most recent negotiations.
It almost happened.
When were they? Would you remind me?
It was this 2004. 2004. So it was at the end of August 2004, and our contract was set to expire. And what happened this time was that the actual mayor of our city got involved in the labor negotiations. Now, the mayor knew nothing about the Philadelphia Orchestra's inner workings, but he knew with the Philadelphia Orchestra, he knew how important it was to the city, he knew how important it was to the country, and he knew what a treasure it was. And so he stepped in, and he would spend time with both sides, and then he would counsel and mediate, and they were able to work out an agreement.
But as I saw it from the outside, it was very ugly, with public statements from both sides. A lot of dirty linen got washed in public, a lot of accusations of bad faith and lying on both sides. And so, with no need to dwell on that, because I think everybody who knows about orchestras knows how these things could happen. You all know that it's not a road you really want to go down in the future, not a road you can go down.
Right.
Because don't you think that the X factor that has changed everything is the peril that we all feel that orchestras and classical music are in?
Yes.
That it plays less of a role in society. The funding is much more difficult. The ticket sales are more difficult. It doesn't take care of itself the way it did even 20 years ago.
No, it's true. And the sad thing is, you know, we all think that what we do is really important. All musicians think that, oh my goodness, this is like the sun rises and sets, you know, around classical music. But in fact, in many communities in the United States, the orchestras could fold up tomorrow, lock their doors, go away, and the communities wouldn't even notice. So it's a different picture today. And you're right, we really could never afford to go down that. And we don't want to even try to go down that path.
But really tricky decisions may be necessary. That could involve cutbacks. They have certainly involved, with some orchestras, actual decreases in pay, temporary or permanent, cutting the lengths of seasons. I'm not saying the Philadelphia Orchestra needs to, or will go down those paths, but things like that come up. And when they can be discussed cooperatively, and I think when the musicians know that if management says we're in financial trouble, that it's true.
It's
because
believable.
You've seen the books.
Right.
Right? I know that St. Paul did that very successfully, brought people together. And it sounds like you're doing it as well.
Yeah, we're trying, actually this year, we're in the middle year of a 3-year contract. And like I said, I'm on the members committee. And what we're trying to do this year is really organize our internal culture of the musicians so that we're truly prepared for next year's negotiations, that we don't start in September and go, oh, this is negotiating year, and it takes us 6 months to realize what it is that we need to be doing and getting our ducks in a row. We're really trying to do that now so that we can be very realistic. We're trying to look at, you know, we're very aware of what the finances are. There are 4 of us who are on the board of directors, and there are 2 of us who are on the executive board. So I hear all this financial updates, and one of the other musicians as well, twice a month. We see where we are, which is a very good financial position at this point, because we came out of a $4-point-something million deficit to a balanced budget in 1 year. And we didn't take any cutbacks in personnel. We didn't take any cuts in pay, though we didn't advance for a year.
Money drawn from the endowment to make that happen?
No.
Congratulations.
No. Well, no, other than the usual 6% that you can. Well, it's very tricky because one of the things I learned being on the board is that you have your endowment draw. And I don't know how this is in Cincinnati, but in Philadelphia, there's also another pot of money called board designated funds. And they are able to temporarily borrow out of that. It's unrestricted endowment. But this balancing the budget did not include going into that unrestricted.
The moral for this, let me address the broad public here, and especially other people in orchestras or who may be in orchestras. Look what you have to know.
Yep.
It's not just playing your instrument. It's not just looking out for yourself with the union and your colleagues. You actually have to know how the orchestra is run. And tell me, Gloria, how did you learn to understand these numbers? Because I was telling you earlier, I've looked at orchestras' tax returns. I find them interesting. I also find them over my head financially.
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, I hate math. All I want to do is just make sure I have enough money to pay my bills, you know. But having that said, when our CFO would get up and give us all these pages of spreadsheets of columns of this and that, you know, my eyes would be just glazing over. So I decided that what I would do would be to prepare in advance. So I took everything home. I mean, they do send it to the board members in advance, and I would send it to the board members in advance. And I would take it and I would try to understand it on the basis of what I'd heard the last time, so that then I became more conversant in the actual language that she was speaking. I didn't even know some of these terms that she was using.
Did she make an effort to explain it?
Yes, she did. And actually, I went to her and I said, you know, Peg, I think I need some private lessons with you. And she said, you know what, Gloria, that would be great, because I know if I teach you, you will teach everybody else. So it's the old, you know, the mother, if you educate the mother will go out and educate all the, you know, the rest of the family. So I've been able to learn a great, and it's not that I know everything, believe me, but I want to say, now I feel that I can be part of the conversation when it's happening. I can ask questions. I can understand the answers, at least in the most elementary terms.
Because the old way used to be, everybody took care of their little slice of the pie. So for all of you, you played the music, and then when contract time came, you knew what you wanted and what you thought you deserved. And it was up to management to go and find that money, which they were once able to do. But not anymore.
It's harder. It's
harder.
Much more difficult.
It's much harder. So you have to be more cooperative and more informed about making your demands, because you have to make ones that could be realized. And if you're not intelligent about doing that and informed about doing it, by the way, the same thing applies to management. I'm not saying musicians have any special responsibility here, and I trust that the management is learning more about the musicians
as
you're learning more about them. But if these things aren't decided with full knowledge of what's possible, then it can get ugly to no point.
It's true. But one example of how knowing the finances helped us to come to terms in this last contract was one of the things that the management was asking was for us to perform a Sunday series. Well, I have to tell you, in Philadelphia, nobody's ever done anything on Sunday outside of Play the Messiah one Sunday a year. And that was, you know, like a paid extra thing to have to perform on a Sunday. And Sundays are really pretty sacrosanct in the Philadelphia Orchestra. And it became obvious that this was a place for them to create a new series for a new type of audience. So we agreed to this sort of experiment, and I think we added, it was either 4 or 5 Sundays for this series. Well, we're getting ready to play the first one this next Sunday, and the series sold 80% sold out by subscription. And of that 80% of those people, of the total, there are 8,000 new subscribers who've never subscribed to the Philadelphia Orchestra. New names on our list. So we can point to that and say, you know, we gave up something there, but look what we gained. And those 8,000 new subscribers are people that we can also solicit for annual fund and other donations to help us run the organization.
Always important, especially in a climate like the one we have now, to bring new
faces.
But tell me something that management has learned.
They learned. I think they've learned to bring the musicians in on the ground floor on every major decision. And I think they've learned how the musicians in general are very bright and creative people and are generally quite accomplished at many other things. And to bring their voices to the table makes the conversation richer, so that when you distill down to where your final result, it's just going to be at a higher level. Plus, you've got the buy-in because everybody started at the beginning with the project. It's not something the management dreamed up and then said, oh, here, and by the way, will you sign on to this? Or we're going to have you do this because it's legal. It says we can do so in the contract.
Right.
And so even if there's something that they can do in the contract, they'll come to us and discuss it now because they'll know that we may have an extra idea to add to the pot that's going to make the result that much better.
So you can contribute to the way the orchestra's run and suggest management things that they didn't think of, and they're open to this.
Absolutely. They really encourage it.
Now, in what other areas can you imagine the musicians being empowered?
Empowered. Well,
that's a big word.
I'll tell you another one. The one that's really just brought tremendous joy to me is that we have this initiative in Philadelphia called Raising the Invisible Curtain. And one of our projects under Raising the Invisible Curtain is that we've started having musicians speak from the stage at various times.
Because the idea of this, just to step back for a moment so people understand, is to make the orchestra more accessible, both to its existing audience and then to the people who don't come, to the community at large.
So when we first started this about a year and a half ago, there was so much grumbling about it. Oh, we don't want anybody out there talking before we're going to play a serious concert, and I'm not going to do that, and who's going to do it, and, you know, all this kind of thing. So we started out with a very small core of people. And we had worked with Eric Booth, who was really terrific, and coaching us in this type of audience engagement.
Yeah, Eric being just a star consultant, one of the consultants who actually makes a tremendous difference.
Absolutely.
Because there's some spark that jumps from him.
Yes.
And you learn how to do it too, how to make a spark jump from you.
You learn how to do it from his example, which is great because as musicians, that's how we learn all the time. That's how we interact. You play something, I respond to it. And Eric's mentoring is like that. And anyway, we had spent some time with Eric, And in fact, I must say, we had the highest attendance at a meeting with Eric that we have ever had in the orchestra outside of a contract ratification. We had 70 some odd members of the orchestra come for a dinner meeting with Eric, where Eric worked with us. But at any rate, we started this. And, you know, there was a little grumbling, but it took off. You know, one person got up, it was very good, we got great audience feedback. Every person that got up had worked with either Eric or our new animateur, Tom Cabanis. An animateur it comes from the London Symphony Orchestra, was the orchestra that came up with this initial concept. And they had the animateur position, and the man, and I can't remember his name at the moment, but anyway, he went to the Berlin Philharmonic to become the animateur there. But he trained all these animateurs in Europe, and we had a teleconference with them in Europe, in London.
But it sounds like an animator.
It is. That's exactly what he is.
So it animates the orchestra musicians
it teaches,
so that they can come out of
to
themselves.
engage with. It gives you all kinds of techniques so that you can engage with your audience. But sometimes the animateur will lead a student concert or a family concert, or sometimes the animateur will speak at an event with the orchestra and interact with the conductor on the podium and the audience and the orchestra.
So it's somebody whose job is to create interaction between all elements of the orchestra community, but public interaction that really shows and makes a difference.
I saw him do an amazing event. Once a year when we do our annual subscription, when we're talking about the introduction of the season, the new season. Well, Tom Cabanis, this was his first year, and he had created this event that was going to be the announcement of the season. And so as member of the board, I thought, well, okay, I better go. It's in the middle of the afternoon. It was at like 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon or some strange time. And I thought, okay, I'll go back in town for this, but I feel an obligation to show up at this. Imagine my surprise. I walked into the hall, and there were, I don't know, 1,500 people there in the middle of the afternoon. I thought, what are all these people doing here? You know, this is just supposed to be a press thing. Tom had created an event. Emanuel Ax was playing on the stage with Christoph Eschenbach playing the accompaniment for him, and they were talking about the introduction of the Beethoven series, and then they fielded questions. And then there was like a video presentation of some other parts of the season. And then there were going to be 3 different composers that were going to compose, and they were all there, and they were talking to the audience about what their compositions were going to be. And one of the compositions was going to be celebrating the Benjamin Franklin's 300th anniversary. And of course, Benjamin Franklin was a big deal in Philadelphia. And so here they had the glass harmonica from the Franklin Institute, and one of the percussionists was out demonstrating the glass harmonica in the hall. He was in the audience demonstrating this thing. And the composer was up on stage asking the audience, now when you think of Benjamin Franklin, what sorts of ideals do you think about? Because he wanted ideas to put in his piece that he was writing. So he was actually involving the audience in his creative process. So, you know,
bringing this whole discussion around, you all as musicians get involved in this kind of creative process, and if all really goes well with this, you're not just sitting there playing the notes in your part, with granted a lot of creativity and a lot of commitment, but now you can be involved in things like, what does Benjamin Franklin mean for Philadelphia? What does he mean today? What do questions like that have to do with the Philadelphia Orchestra's role in the community and the world?
Because we have an American Symphony Orchestra League conducting fellow that we hired. The American Symphony Orchestra League brought us 5 really talented, really qualified people to choose from. We auditioned them, we chose one, and we were working with him, and I'm on his mentoring team. So I now get the chance, you know, and it was really interesting because...
For example, concert series that I've hosted with the Pittsburgh Symphony, I am so struck by the operations people who go in the background and make sure the concert actually happens. So often in the past, the musicians just came in and played the music and went home. And now it seems to me that you and others are getting a chance to actually help create the context in which you work, which is such a major part of your lives and affects you in so many ways because it is so big and complex and expensive. And so now you take part in it. One more thing I might want to ask you, and it's about the strategies of making a career. It's something you and I have talked about, and it was certainly something that I hadn't known about. The opportunities that arise for you, when they arise in your life, and how you strategize when the right time is to accept them.
Right, it's really difficult, and I think that I know conservatories are getting better at working at this with their students, at being more realistic about what musicians need to know when they walk out the door with that diploma, what next? Because many times people are floundering, and these are really talented people, and you've given up some of the best years of your life and some of the best, of your parents' savings to have this education.
All too true.
Right? And then what? Are you employable or what? But it's such an important thing to know and to have a mentor along the way, or a policy or a program at a school which really sets up some expectations for you so that you know when you need to do what. I was just saying that there is a certain point in your life, if you want to be a performer, when you come out of school or when you go into school and you're not sure, should I be a performer or should I go the educational track or should I do management track? If you have in your heart that you think you would like to try performing and that you think you have a fairly good shot at it, that you're not just being delusional, you got to try that now, because your window of opportunity for that, for being able to successfully audition for a job, be it in a symphony orchestra or a string quartet or a solo career, whatever, your window of is very narrow of opportunity for that.
Yeah.
Right.
I
had started out being an associate principal. I was with Michael Tilson Thomas in the Buffalo Philharmonic, and I was associate principal cellist there. And my choice was, do I follow the first stand principal or an associate principal, or do I follow what my dream was and my heart of hearts? When I grew up in Evansville, Indiana, I would go to the library and check out all the records of the symphony orchestra repertoire, and of course all the records were the Philadelphia Orchestra. So my dream was always to be a string player in the Philadelphia Orchestra.
You mean they didn't even have Cleveland and New York?
No, I'm
or
sorry.
Chicago?
They didn't. They really only had Philadelphia.
Philadelphia made a lot of records.
Yeah, that's one of the things we did a lot of. Yeah. Or maybe those were just the ones I preferred. But at any rate, that was always my dream. So I decided that after 3 years in the Buffalo Philharmonic, that's what I was going to really try to pursue. There was an opening in Philadelphia, and I thought, you know what, I've got to try that, because if I don't try that now, there may not be another opening there for 10, 15, 20 years, and by that time, my window of opportunity for moving on to something like that would have passed. So fortunately, I was able to win that audition and be able to fulfill my dream of playing in what I consider to be the best string section in the world. Sorry, Ellen. We have fights over this constantly.
I bet you do. And in Cleveland. But then you had to decide if you would be interested in the principal cello position.
Or any other position.
Right.
And, I had always wanted to have children as well. And, you have to make choices in life. And there's a certain point after you get your dream job and you get your tenure. For women, you have certain years that are your childbearing years, and you make that choice, and I've never regretted it. It was very difficult to live through, and I lived through having au pairs for 21 years in my house with childcare, but, I'm here to...
There's a certain window, you said, when a principal job might appear on the horizon for you.
Right.
And I think you said that it was the same window in which you had to be seriously thinking about children.
Right. And that's what happened in my case. But, it was also, do I want that? I mean, what do I want to fulfill my own life? And I think all along your path, you always have to be looking to yourself and listen to your inner...
Always.
And not what a teacher says to you that they want for you, or what your parents say that they want for you, or the peer pressure of what somebody says, well, why are you sitting in the back of the Philadelphia Orchestra section? You should be sitting principal somewhere. I'm honored to be sitting in what I consider
And you
the
also
best
got
section.
other things that are so important to you. And as your son's jumping to give the
Yeah.
money shows
Right.
have actually paid off in ways that are beyond any price.
Yeah. And it may come to somebody sooner, it may come to somebody later so that it works out. But having children and playing the orchestra job is a very, very difficult balance, period. And if you become a principal player on top of that, it just adds another layer. You know, and for me, I have played in 2 quartets professionally and done all kinds of international touring and, you know, been artist in residence now at Villanova University for about 20 years. So I have fantastic chamber music opportunities in a chamber music series that we program and, you know, invite all the guest artists to ourselves. We have total carte blanche with that. So I have a lot of artistic freedom with those things, and I find my own personal voice through those kinds of things.
Right. Which is to say that your life can be much more varied than your job description would suggest.
And a cellist in the Philadelphia Orchestra.
But you do so many other things in your personal and professional life, and it seems to me that it's the sum total that gives you your satisfaction.
It's absolutely true, and I just feel so blessed that I have all the opportunities that I have, and plus the stability of the job, of having the Philadelphia Orchestra, which provides me with a wonderful living, and that I can have a family, and that I can have a great instrument, and I can have the opportunities to play chamber music and attract really good students to my studio.
And at the same time, you had to make all of this happen.
Yes, I did.
And the Philadelphia Orchestra alone doesn't make it happen.
Nope.
So you never stand still in life. Is this one message we could get from this?
I think so. It's just like how when we practice, we're never really ever reaching perfection, and we go out and we play the best concert we've ever played, but oh, we could do better. We know we could, and we go right back to the practice room.
And then you
it's
go
the same
back
sort
and you
of
make
thing.
it happen. And now orchestras are learning that they can be better institutions. And you're right in the heart of that.
And it's exciting to be a part of that.
I bet. So thank you, Gloria.
Thank you for the
so much.
opportunity.